When you have a sprawling show like Andor, where there's maybe 4 or 5 main storylines and an additional dozen or so secondary storylines, it can be very easy to lose control of the characters and the individual storylines. And it becomes even harder to neatly wrap everything up at conclusion. That was the problem with the last season of the Game of Thrones, which resulted in a flurry of executions and hurried episodes. I call that the let's just kill everyone and get things over method. Now, in Andor, at least in the first few episodes, I saw these same worrying signs. For instance, what happened to Andor's sister?
A friend of mine said there was a girl from Canary working here.
Canary?
She's the main reason why our protagonist got caught in this scuffle, which resulted in his whirlwind adventure in the first place. The next time we even see her get mentioned is in this scene with Marva, much later on.
Stop searching for your sister. It's a fantasy. There were no survivors on Canary.
It's really interesting being a media consumer nowadays because we have these streaming wars, so all of the major mega conglomerates that are involved in making films and TV are fighting each other over dominance and just saturating the market with content. That means every second of our attention is important. So for a long burn like Andor to work, viewer investment in the show needs to pay off. Previous things that the viewer have seen need to give context to actions later on in the series, which helps paint a larger picture for the world of Andor. And this is something that this show really excels in. There's a reason why I've been doing so many more videos than I normally do about Andor, and that's simply because there's so many details in this TV series, so many small and wonderful things that the directors and writers incorporate to create a satisfying and tightly formed story. And the finale, the last episode of this first season of Andor, where all of the characters and storylines converge on Ferrix at Marva's funeral, well, this was a masterpiece. The way things play out here and how all the threads neatly and organically fall into place, this is a clear sign that the writers and directors know the characters so intimately that all they have to do is just release them into these scenarios.
I want Mama Marva.
And let them realistically react to the situation. There's no forced moments here. We're watching life naturally unfold. There are no MacGuffins or magical devices to save the day. It's just pure chaos with an invisible hand, Tony Gilroy's hand, carefully guiding it. And when the audience doesn't sense the director's intentions very clearly, then the immersion becomes that much better. Right from the first scene, we know that things are going down. We see Wilman Pak using a soldering iron to create some type of device. Given the fact that his father's hologram is on the counter and the last time we see his father was at that dead alien baby headphone party, well, I'm assuming Pak Sr. has not come back, and Wilman, well, he's turned his father's shop into an anarchist kitchen. We see this scene first because it is the catalyst for the entire episode. That bomb he's making will be the very thing that ignites the tension that's been brewing since the very beginning of the show. It's also a great reminder of what Nemec says in his manifesto. Here's the reason why the Empire will never win.
Remember this. The Imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks. It leaks. Authority is brittle.
There's no Obi-Wan Kenobi and Force Ghost for this Luke Skywalker, just poor Nemec, who was crushed by money and now lives on a datapad. This is Star Wars for the non-believer. Andor is very rational, and it is very clear on how devastating a rebellion can be. This is a brutal show. Now, Andor at its core is not really an action movie. The prequel era with its massive grand armies fighting on large battlefields were perfect for those big set-piece battles and over-the-top action and war drama sequences that a lot of fans want. Take a note, Disney, if you want a successful TV show or movie idea, just make a war drama, action flick that's set during the Clone Wars. A lot of people will watch that. But the original trilogy era, especially before Yavin 4, where the Empire is struggling to contain a growing resistance movement, lends itself naturally to the spy thriller genre. I mean, this is ultimately what Andor is all about, for those of you who are still waiting for the lightsaber duels and, gigantic set-piece battles. This is essentially the Bourne series mixed with the classic Star Wars take of leaving your moisture farmer and understanding that you as an individual actually has what it takes to affect change on the galaxy, and that the only thing you really should fear is not trying.
One single thing will break the siege. Remember this. Try.
Nemec says it so much better. And what's even more interesting is that this line opposes directly what Yoda says.
All right, I'll give it a try.
No! Try not! Do!
Because at the end of the day, the message for Andor is clear. This is a story about the everyman. It's not about, convincing us that we're all superheroes and we have superpowers, and with those superpowers we can change the galaxy.
Who did this?
In Andor, the fate of the galaxy does not just rely on one individual. That's already been done by George Lucas himself. Why even try to repeat something that's already been done so well before? The fans will definitely not like some things, and then the critics will moan that you're catering too much to the fans. It's all a nightmare. And so instead, Andor continues what Rogue One started. Nemik tells the audience to try because this is the story of all the viewers, the every man and every woman. We all come from different walks of life, different backgrounds. We have our own different struggles, our own different needs and concerns. Nemik does not ask the audience to revolt directly. He simply wants us to be awakened to the reality of the situation we find ourselves in, and to begin to understand that most people out there, we're good, and if we're united, we're much stronger than the forces that try to oppress us. And that authoritarian powers, they don't need to be taken down by superheroes. Sometimes you just need a crowd to flood into a square, just like the people of Ferrix who flooded Rick's Road, far more than the 30 or so people that the Empire allowed them to bring to this event. It's at this moment we really see Dedra Meero stumble. She's the most cunning ISB officer in Major Partagaz's tool belt, a sharp, cold, and rational supervisor who has up until this point made all the right moves, and has just been a step behind Andor the complete time. But even she, at the end of the day, despite how much we all like her, especially before the dead children headphone parties occurred, well, she's still an Imperial. And it's clear from her white leather trench coat and how she's just consumed by the mob that she is no different from other Imperials in her inability to understand the people of the galaxy. As Andor always says,
They're so proud of themselves, they don't even care. They're so fat and satisfied.
and despite all of her more positive characteristics like her work ethic and her pragmatic view on how the Empire should respond to things,
We get nothing from a dead body.
Containment, yes. Snipers, no. I want him taken alive.
I need him alive. Don't make me say it again.
her rejection of collective punishment wielded against civilians,
We're playing straight into their hands.
Whose hands?
The rebels. This is exactly what they want.
Despite all this, Dedra still underestimates the enemy. She has no idea what's about to happen at this funeral. She's just like all of those Imperial officers looking down at the rabble from her high tower as if they can't see her every move. And if Dedra truly was that good person that a lot of us want her to be, she wouldn't be in the Empire in the first place. And how long it will take her to come to that realization, well, that will define what kind of character she becomes, if she leaves at all. What's interesting about what happens to Dedra is the fact that Cyril Karn saves her life. His obsession, his call to adventure and self-worth are all realized in this fantastic woman he sees before him. We did a video talking about how Cyril Karn is a wild card. He's a wild card because he actually doesn't have political ideology like Dedra Meero does. We mentioned how he's not a fascist, he's not a true Imperial at all. His love for things like the Empire or his corporate security job are just physical manifestations of deeper unfulfilled desires.
I want what you want. I sense it. I know it.
His desire to belong, to feel worthy, to be loved.
What is the return on my investment?
We were talking about you snooping on me.
The shadow of a son, a tenant, a stranger.
His mom has done a lot of damage to him and he's probably stunted his personal growth. And despite the fact that Cyril Karn is a pretty intelligent individual, he still has not progressed beyond his childhood needs and wants, which is why he's so freaking awkward. We actually don't know what Cyril Karn's real character is like, although everything from his modified uniform and collars to his complete lack of respect for rules and regulations tells us that he's not a good fit for the Empire.
So you've been at the Bureau of Standards for less than a month and you've filed 5 false inquiries.
6, actually.
I wasn't counting this morning.
Cyril probably hasn't really thought about what the Empire represents to him. He probably hasn't thought about what Dedra means to him at all either. Because his relationship with the Empire and individuals like Dedra is one of obsession. He doesn't really understand either of them. He just likes the sense of strength and authority these things can give him, and he really wants that strength and authority. He wants control over his own life. He doesn't want his mom controlling his life for sure, and this is what pushes him to take such bold action and save Dedra Meero. And Dedra, despite trying to fight off creepy Cyril's advances up until this point, finally has to come to a realization of her own. Something that Cyril Karn has realized since episode 3, that this fight against the rebellion is much more difficult and chaotic than she would have ever expected from the safety of Coruscant. I mean, this woman gets hit in the head with a rock, and then she was almost, well, this is still Disney, and the people on Ferrix seem to be well-balanced and good people, but they're also clearly savage people. They're large, thick, muscled men who break apart ships for a living with their bare hands. I mean, take a look at the mild-mannered Brasso, who takes off of work early to take care of Andor's sick mom and later sleeps over with B so that the robot won't be sad and lonely. This is the same individual who will not hesitate to tie a tac pod to a piece of salvage in episode 3, causing the corpo on board to crash and die. And then in the middle of the riot, Brasso goes completely into beast mode. The duality of this character is brilliant. I mean, Brasso is clearly a very strong, insecure individual. This is why he doesn't go around starting fights, ever. When people like Brasso decide to start bludgeoning people in the head with blunt objects, that is your canary in the coal mine. It means that the Empire has crossed the line completely. And in this moment of complete vulnerability, Dedra Miller realizes something that she never learned in an academy or in the ISB, and that is, you need to depend on other people. You need to have allies in this fight because the rebels have a lot of allies. The Empire is completely missing this element, and that's because it knows human bonds are what can turn people against its unnatural control methods. While the people of Ferrix are united, the people in the Empire are constantly bickering and trying to undermine each other. This is all purposefully designed. It's designed to isolate people so that the Empire can more easily control them. If you can't organize, you can't start a revolution. There's also one other thing that Cyril Karn can help Dedra with, and that is failure. The guy has failed a lot. He's lost everything since the first Ferrix ambush, and now Dedra might be losing everything as well because of her own failure in the situation. And it seems like Blevin, her rival, well, he's cultivating a very interesting relationship with Mon Mothma's driver. It's revealed that Perrin, Mon Mothma's husband, has a gambling issue, and for the time being, this might at least cover some of the discrepancies for Mon Mothma for the time being. No matter what the situation is, Cyril now has shown his worth, and Dedra will most likely have to rely on him in one way or another, especially as she loses more power over this serious mistake she's made. I'm pretty sure this won't happen, but what if like Dedra Miller gets fired and they have to both move into Cyril's mom's apartment? That would be hilarious. The finale does an excellent job at mood building. It's been building this tension that's been growing since episode 1. And you really see this flurry of chaos in the first few scenes. I also want to point out it's clear that this is where the production spent most of their budget, populating this world of Ferrix. Gone are all the close-up shots of the main characters and empty, blurred-out streets behind them. There are extras everywhere in this episode, and in crowds it's much easier to hide covert agents, and they're everywhere. We get a glimpse of Nurchi snooping on Brasso and Pegla. Nurchi will try to uncover information from Pegla at the bar and loosen his lips with a few drinks. Nurchi would then proceed to inform on Andor. Remember, Andor owns Nurchi credits, and unfortunately those credits that Andor gave to Bix never made it to him because of her detainment. Every little thing in this series has a reason for happening. And Nurchi at the end, despite clearly having a change of heart listening to Marva's speech, well, he dies, or at least is knocked out. Just like poor Tim in the first episode, the message here is snitches get stitches. Meanwhile, Cinta is following Dedra, who's taking a tour of the city with Corval, who was a daily patron in the coffee shop that Cinta worked in. The fate of Cinta and Corval were intertwined the moment he chose to hunt the same prey as Cinta and wait in the same hiding place. This woman is a predator. She is a tiger roaming around her territory, and this was just another sign of how, foolish and inept that Imperial intelligence was at this point. I mean, clearly none of these people understood that Ferrix was about to explode and riot all over the place. And this is mirrored beautifully in how the funeral procession comes along. The instruments of the band are interesting and clearly cobbled together pieces, probably scraps of different salvaged instruments, refurbished and polished to look clean again. And this is the way the resourceful people of Ferrix always have acted.
You know what? I don't make this anymore. Because I'd rather sell you a brand new system at 10 times the price.
They stand diametrically opposed to the clean and newly manufactured look of the Empire, which worships material wealth above all else. The band begins playing. First it's a drummer, then a lone brass instrument. Others then begin to join in a completely haphazard way. It's a bit random and chaotic, but gradually a single melody appears in a line, forms, and the band members, who came from different parts of the streets, form into one large body. This is the very embodiment of what Nemec talks about. This is how rebellions are formed.
Random acts of insurrection are occurring constantly throughout the galaxy. There are whole armies, battalions that have no idea that they've already enlisted in the cause.
We're given a glimpse of the bomb maker, the nervous Imperial commanders, and everyone else in between falling into their places to watch the funeral. There's a weight to all of it, and the audience gets to feel it. We know that there's no actual plan for the people of Ferrix to revolt. This will just have to happen naturally. And it's because of that control that Nemec keeps talking about. People, when they're pushed into corners and no longer are able to do the very basic things that allow them to be humans, well, then they begin to revolt. And the Empire, they will not stand for it. They want compliance. 30 or 40 attendances to this funeral, what a joke. And all around the galaxy, people will follow Ferrix. It's not a question of how, but when. The Empire was always stupid. It turned normal people into bomb makers. It turned salvage workers into frontline warriors. It turned dead mothers into rebel orators. Nemec understood this. This is probably why he was always so optimistic, so bright-eyed. And I guess now there's no need to feel bad that he's passed, because his word will live on. He died happily knowing that the Empire would fall. His manifesto doesn't come from ego. It doesn't come from a desire to make an impact or contribute to the movement. It comes directly from its heart. This is a reminder to those who have forgotten this truth about the Empire's vulnerability. This is a reminder to individuals who have been isolated and trapped by the Empire. This is a message for all of those individuals out there who feel horrible, but have forgotten that people around them, everyone else also feels horrible. Everyone else is suffering from the same oppression, the same regime. It's also a reminder to people like Andor that he does have the power to affect change. And that yes, maybe there is an overwhelming sense of doom hanging over his head. He's probably experienced terrible things, but all it takes is one good deed. All it takes is one good deed by many people to create massive, massive change on the galactic level. It could be something as simple as helping out a homeless veteran sitting out in the cold, or checking in on an elderly woman who isn't feeling her best. It's these small moments of kindness that can create an unstoppable wave of gratitude and love and connect communities together to make them stronger and more resilient to authoritarian regimes, which seeks to isolate and pick out the weaklings and destroy them. This is what Nemec means by try. All you have to do is try. Try to care for one another, because such actions are a contagion, a rejection of what authoritarians believe. Authoritarians are some of the most cowardly people in the world. I mean, look at them. Putin, Kim Jong-un, these men, they hide behind gigantic war machines, weapons and missiles, threats. And that's because they don't have the support of the people. They want everyone to think that people are naturally chaotic and evil. They want you to think that the Republicans and the Democrats are your enemies instead of your neighbors. They want you to be so fearful of each other that you'll elect or greet authoritarianism control by a central power. Nemec's manifesto is a clear reminder to the audience that whenever you begin to feel overwhelmed by negativity, depression, other terrible things, that you in fact do have control. And you can seize control by simply doing something good for yourself, for the world around you, for your family, for your friends. It's the biggest you to the darkness that follows all of us. And lastly, we have Luthen Rael, who has given everything for the rebellion. He's become a machine.
I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
In this entire episode, he watches the slow-moving wave of rebellion envelop Ferrix, and I believe he feels a sort of relief. He understands that whatever spark he created on Aldhani has now turned into a small fire, and that the larger the rebellion grows, the less of a weight he'll feel on his shoulders. He's reminded that he's not alone, and that he's not destined to be damned. If anything, he's already done his part. He won't need to kill Andor. He doesn't even need to continue to fight, but I'm sure he'll do so anyway. This final episode, this final drama at the funeral of Marva was just so masterfully crafted. I mean, if you think about it, this funeral means a dozen different things, a dozen different emotions to a dozen very interesting characters. It perfectly wraps up the story for the first season, which is really just the beginning of Andor's future rebellion. This is the best executed finale in any Star Wars TV show, if not any TV show I've seen this year or in recent times. I mean, it's just so well done, and you know, finales are very hard to pull off, especially finales in the middle of a 2-season episode. I mean, it is very easy to build up cool characters and you know, like take them onto these random journeys, but to tie everything together in a neat bundle, that takes an immense amount of skill. And yes, this is far superior to the end of The Mandalorian. Yes, I really enjoyed that episode, but you know, we as audiences have to realize what the directors are doing, and they're using nostalgia there. They're bringing back Luke Skywalker, character cameos, which is fine. We're allowed to enjoy these things, but again, we should demand more from our directors. We should demand more from Disney. We want newer, better content, not just the same thing recycled over and over again. And if you are going to make a new show, they better put the same type of effort that Tony Gilroy and his team put into Andor. From here on out, this is the gold standard that Star Wars needs to hit. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below. In the next few weeks, we're going to probably talk a lot about Andor until the Bad Batch starts. So, you know, stay tuned. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy,